If you watched the show last Friday, my conversation with Seahawks beat reporter Greg Bell of Tacoma News Tribune, you may have heard something that you would find mildly surprising or shocking, depending on your views of the Seahawks roster, and in particular, the center position. Has a new starter emerged at the pivot position? Has Jalen Sundell overtaken the reins at center from Olu Oluwatimi? If so, why? We're going to explore that coming up today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Before we get started, I would just like to take a moment and ask you to do all the usual things to support me and the channel. You can subscribe, hit that thumbs up button to like the video. That certainly helps. If you want notified anytime I post new material, hit that bell button. All the other ways you can support the channel are listed down below in the description, including the new Patreon setup. Get over there and check that out for exclusive content. You can also do that as a paid member of this channel right here. And check out the merch store while you're at it. And all of the new items in the Seahawks Forever store. Speaking of Patreon and the membership, I made a promise to you last Friday and then completely forgot because I got so absorbed with the great conversation that I had with Greg on the show. I was supposed to give away the polo shirt. I have not done that. I have not done the work to do that. Went out of town, spent a couple of days over Father's Day weekend out visiting some family. I will do that tomorrow. I'll gather up all of those of you who expressed interest in that large polo shirt, and I will give it away on the show tomorrow. So my apologies for that. Stay tuned for that. All right, let's talk about the center position here. This is one that has certainly been the poster child, if you will, over the last 10 years for the offensive line issues the Seahawks have had. Some people even call it the curse of Max Unger. Ever since Unger was traded to New Orleans in 2015 for Jimmy Graham, the Seahawks since then, in 10 week one starts, have started 7 different players. Justin Britt and Ethan Posick, the only players to start multiple seasons week one at center. The team thought they may have solved the problem last year, right before training camp, signing Connor Williams, coming off that ACL injury from the Miami Dolphins, a guy that was a borderline all-pro the 2 previous seasons, still young enough in his prime. And while it looked like he was over the knee injury, there were other issues there that he just couldn't get past, and he retired abruptly and surprisingly week 8, I believe, or week 9, right before the Seahawks bye week. So then they're back to square one again. Now they have devoted some resources to that position. Obviously, Olusegun Oluwatimi started the rest of the season after Williams was shelved. He was their 2023 fifth-round draft pick, and then he was backed up all season long by Jalen Sundell, the undrafted free agent out of North Dakota State. So going into this offseason, a lot of people, myself included, thought that center might be a focus. And early on in the offseason, before free agency started, we all thought that Drew Dahlman would be a target, right? The former Atlanta Falcons player finishing out his rookie contract. We know him here on the West Coast from his time at Stanford. He was a guy that I studied pretty intensively the year he came out because the Seahawks have needed centers for that long, as previously stated. But then we learned that Dahlman only had eyes for the Chicago Bears. And likewise, the Chicago Bears had eyes for Dahlman. He was basically off the market before it ever started and signed a lucrative contract with the Bears immediately upon being able to legally do so. So there the Seahawks were again with Oluwatimi and Sundell on their roster. Mike Nowitzki, who they had signed as an undrafted free agent out of Penn State last year as well, was signed to a futures contract, so he was hanging around as well. But Dahlman was off the board. There were no other free agent centers worth looking at. Josh Myers was a guy out of Green Bay who was finishing up his rookie contract, a guy that we knew and we studied out of Ohio State when he came out the same year as Dahlman. But there was so little market for his services, he ended up signing a backup deal with the Jets. Couldn't even find a starting job. That's what the free agent market looked like for centers this offseason. And then it was a bad draft, too, where the best center, universally agreed upon as the best center in the draft, Jared Wilson out of Georgia, went in the second round of the Patriots, but was pretty universally viewed as a guy that was going to need some time. Only one full year as a starter, very raw prospect out of Georgia. So here we were, Oluwatimi and Sundell battling for the job. Much to the chagrin of many fans, we have talked about it a lot on this show. If you've watched my show for any length of time, you knew a couple of things about how I viewed these two players. That I was bullish on both of them for different reasons, though. Oluwatimi is a guy that I always viewed, and I've said this many times, said it again, I believe, with Greg on Friday. I always viewed him as a guy that I thought could be a 10-year starter in the league and never make a Pro Bowl, if that makes sense. Just a good, solid player that could man the pivot, give them some consistency there and some longevity there without ever having to break the bank, but a guy that was never going to threaten Canton, right? Was never going to wear a gold jacket. The reasons for that we'll get into in a moment. But I just thought he was a really technically sound player with a lot of experience. I'll go over the bios here in just a second. And then Sundell, again, if you've heard me on the show, first time I ever saw him was at the mock game last year at Lumen Field, sitting next to Bryce Coots. We talk about this all the time. He had just been signed the week before. He signed the same week as Connor Williams, actually. So it was very late in the process. He wasn't a UDFA that signed right after the draft. So I thought, okay, just a camp body, right? But I remember seeing his first few reps at the mock game, and I turned to Bryce, and I was like, who's number 61 I think he was wearing? It was Sundell. He just looked so natural. So ever since then, I've been bullish on Sundell, but for different reasons. With him, it's ceiling. It's upside. We'll get into that in a second. So their bios, right? Their backgrounds. Olu Oluwatimi, 6'3", 309 pounds, spent 1 year at the Air Force Academy, then transferred to Virginia, where he then started 32 games between 2018 and 2021. He was a finalist for the Remington Trophy, finished third in 2021. Then his final season of eligibility, transferred to Michigan in 2022, where he won both the Outland and the Remington Trophy. Remington going to the best center in the country, the Outland going to the best lineman in the country overall, or the best interior lineman. He was first team All-American in 2022, and in 2021 and 2022 combined, so his last year at Virginia and his first year at Michigan, did not allow a single sack or quarterback hit. Okay? So that's what you need to know about Oluwatimi. Jalen Sundell, meanwhile, redshirted at NDSU and then played left tackle. A lot of these guys that come out of NDSU have a similar background. We saw it with Gray Zabel, moved around a lot, right? I think we saw it with Cody Mock, saw it with Dylan Radens. Redshirted as a freshman, and then he played 102 snaps as a backup left tackle in his redshirt freshman season. As a sophomore, switched to center. He'd never played center before in his life. Ended up playing between his sophomore and his senior season over the next 3 years, started 25 games at center. But then he came back, took advantage of that extra COVID year and played a fifth year, so a super senior year, I guess, for the Bison, one to win a national championship, another one. And but they had a need at left tackle. And so they kicked him back out at left tackle after 3 years at center. And all he did there is win first team FCS All-American as a left tackle after not playing it for 3 years, after playing center. Right? Pretty crazy. Blocked for an offense that led the nation in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, total touchdowns. It was also second nationally in passing efficiency, completion percentage, and red zone scoring. We've seen the offensive linemen come out of NDSU. We've seen that system. We've seen them win. It's pretty impressive, right? And these guys come out, as Gray said to me at the Senior Bowl, ready to play. They're prepared differently, even though it's FCS versus FBS. So Mike McDonald's had a year with both these guys now, right? But they bring in an entirely new scheme with the wide zone offense. They bring in Clint Kubiak to call the plays as offensive coordinator. With him, they bring John Benton, years and years in the league as an offensive line coach, among other things. They bring in Rick Dennison, some exposure as an offensive line coach, offensive assistant, in other ways, grizzled veteran. Justin Outen, right? And then Andrew Janoko to coach quarterbacks. So a lot more continuity. We've heard the word alignment this offseason. So they know exactly what kind of lineman they're looking for because it's different in this scheme. So fast forward to this offseason now, and I've got some sound here for you, right? First of all, and I want you to hear some of the differences here, just to lay the background here. This is John Schneider in 2023 after the Seahawks had wrapped up their draft, they always sit down, right, after each of the 3 days and recap their draft picks. This is what John Schneider had to say about Olu Oluwatimi after he was drafted.
Great background, Virginia to Michigan, comes in there, he's named captain the first year. Again, another grown man, incredibly smart, knows the game, natural-born leader, awesome week at the Senior Bowl. You can't move him. I mean, he's just super stout, really good person, and top-level competitor.
Stout. Remember that name. That's what stuck with me. I remembered it ever since that night. Tucked that away. Here's now what Mike McDonald had to say about Jalen Sundell at the Combine.
Well, I thought Jalen played really good football for us, from being an undrafted free agent last year to competing for a starting position. So, I mean, he's right there. We're excited about his development, but Jalen's shown his ability to play all 5 spots, which is, the flexibility there is crucial for us, and we're excited about him.
So we heard Schneider say Oluwatimi can't move him. Stout player. And then we heard McDonald say about Sundell, versatility and development, right? Sounds like a raw prospect. Sometimes the versatility can work against you, right? Jack of all trades, master of none, right? Okay, you can play all 5 spots, but are you good enough at any one to be a starter and be a good pro? So when I asked Greg Bell on the show Friday for his prediction of who he thought was going to win the battle at center and right guard, he caught me off guard. Because what we've seen all offseason is a pretty even delineation. We've seen an even distribution of splits of the reps, but most of the reporting has been Oluwatimi was the guy first with the ones. Greg added a little twist to that. Here's what he had to say on Friday.
I think Jalen Sundell is going to be the starter at center, and they're going to have 2 North Dakota State guys side by side on the offensive line.
Do you say that because as he's gone through OTAs, have his reps increased?
It was flipped where Oluwatimi started the OTAs at the first center and then would split roughly evenly with Sundell. By mini camps, it was flipped where Sundell was the first, and then basically Oluwatimi splitting with him. I rarely have heard, Dan, in my 20-plus years of doing this, coaches and GMs and personnel and scouts go on and on about a second-year undrafted rookie like they did Jalen Sundell this offseason. Unsolicited, I was hearing, man, this new system really fits Jalen Sundell. Man, he moves really well. He's played all the positions. He can really work in this outside zone. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. He didn't even play. He barely played at all last year and was at 2 or 3 positions. You would have thought he was like Dave Remington or Mike Webster, the way they were talking about how the center is perfectly fit for this system.
Well, he did win the Remington Award. Well, Oluwatimi did. I guess that's ironic that he references Remington there in reference to Sundell. So interesting, fascinating, right? Why? Why is Jalen Sundell potentially in line to be the starter right now? Well, we know a couple of things. This wide zone scheme puts an emphasis on athleticism, being able to move. And even though Schneider talks about Oluwatimi being stout, we've seen enough from him. He could be capable of playing in this scheme, right? We've seen him get out and be able to move well enough. And he's technically sound enough, knows how to use his hands. I think he can survive in this scheme. But is surviving enough? Clint Kubiak, on the first day that he was announced to the public as the new offensive coordinator, had his press conference, then he did the individual interviews, did one with 710, did one on KJR. On KJR, he said something fascinating. Clint Kubiak was asked about, what are some of the tools necessary for this scheme to thrive? And the first thing he said is you need an elite center. An elite center. Now, remember, this is before free agency, everything else. So this spurred a lot of the, a lot of speculation that, they're going to go hard after Drew Dahlman. That's the guy, right? Because there weren't a lot of other options. Here's what Clint Kubiak has had in his past. He had Eric McCoy in New Orleans, right? A name that a lot of you might not be familiar with. Came out of the University of Texas. 6'4", 303, a little bit smaller, right? Longer, a little bit smaller. Oluwatimi is, Schneider used a good word. He's stout. He's a little bit, built a little bit, he's more barrel-like, right? This is Eric McCoy's relative athletic score coming out of Texas. 8.99. Very, very good. Anything 9-ish or above, especially for linemen, is outstanding. And this is where the guys over at the side over there do a great job with this RAS stuff. But just keep that in mind. 8.99. You look at the 40-yard dash, 4.89 at the combine in the 40-yard dash. So this is definitely a guy. You see his 20 and his 10-yard splits. You can forget about the bench and vertical. Obviously, they have to be able to have some short area strength, but the broad and the shuttle are good. You got some lateral movement, but mostly, are you fast enough? Are you fluid? Can you get out and pull? Can you get to the second level and block? Can you move laterally, and can you block downfield? So that's Eric McCoy. He also, during his short time as offensive coordinator in Minnesota, had Garrett Bradbury, he had an incomplete RAS score, but he was known as a guy that was more athletic than strong. It's one of the reasons that I wasn't interested in signing him when he was released by the Vikings. He went to New England really quickly. He had been underperforming his draft status for the last couple of years in Minnesota. Anyway, there's a reason the Vikings moved on from him. He was not very stout in his lower half. He was more of a mover than he was like a punisher, right? But he ran a 4.9 5.40 himself at his combine. But he had some injury issues, couldn't do the full stuff. Now let's look back at the history of this scheme and some of the guys that have been centers under John Benton, the longtime offensive line coach. And the longest stint he was offensive line coach for 8 years in Houston under, for the most of it, Clint Kubiak's father, Gary, right? So he's running that Shanahan wide zone system. So this is a great reference point, in my opinion. Chris Myers was his starting center for 6 of those seasons, and he fit the mold. 6'4", 290, right? So a little bit undersized. Here's his RAS profile, 9.65. That's elite, right? And you look at the 40-yard dash, it's over 5, but anything green here means excellent within that position group based on and compared to other centers over a long period of time. These scores go back to the 1980s, but you also see the explosive elements, the vertical, the broad jump, the shuttle and 3-cone. I mean, Myers was an elite athlete for the center position, even though slightly undersized. They had him at the combine, he was 300 pounds, so 6'4.5", 300 pounds. That's more in line with what we saw from, even though they were running a different scheme last year, it's what the Seahawks were hoping to get out of Connor Williams. It was his MO. Longer, taller center, 6'5", just barely 300 pounds, a 9.5 RAS, right? A 5 flat 40, basically. You look at the 20 and the 10-yard splits again are in the green. And the explosive qualities, the vertical and the broad jump, there's a profile. See what I'm getting at? Now let's look at Olu Oluwatimi and Jalen Sundell. Here's Olu Oluwatimi's. Here, let me get this out of the way. 7.85, right? Just barely over 6'2", 309 pounds, so shorter, stouter. The vertical isn't as good. And look at the 40, the 20, and the 10. Yellow is good. Green is very good. And red is bad. He ran a 4.440, a 3.0520, and his 10-yard split was 1.8. Compare that to Jalen Sundell. And here's his RAS. 9.35 overall at 6'5", 301 pounds. Over a 30-inch vertical. That's in the green. While his 40 was borderline, right? Just barely over 5, just under 5'2". His 20-yard split, his 10-yard split, 2.9 and 1.77. So a 9.35. That's why we're sitting here today talking about the potential for Jalen Sundell to be the starting center. And you see it on tape. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you won't be able to see this. But if you're watching this on Patreon, I will play just a short little clip of him getting out and being a lead blocker on that Zach Charbonnet touchdown run, the 26-yarder against the Green Bay Packers. One of the only highlights of that game after Geno got hurt and Howell had to come in the second half. We've talked ad nauseum about this, how Ryan Grubb didn't do him any favors, just didn't stick with the run enough, ran 15 straight pass plays. Howell got sacked 4 or 5 times, threw a couple interceptions. And then even after this play worked so well, and it's got its zone concepts, right? You see Sundell from the center position pulling out and getting out into space and looking really comfortable doing it, just looking calm. Like there's centers that can do this, that can get out and pull, but it's laborious. It looks like a struggle for them. They can get to their spot, though. They can get to their point. They can be effective, but it doesn't look easy. He makes it look really natural, really easy. Then he gets downfield. He looks for someone to block and then throws, I think, the key block on the whole run. Gets a guy way downfield, 10, 15 yards down past the line of scrimmage, takes him out. Charbonnet's able to score from there. The reason I can't show it on YouTube is because of copyright issues, and I just can't risk it at this point. So just another little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Get over to Patreon. Check out the membership tiers over there so you can see stuff like that, including full breakdowns like the one that Bryce Coots and I did on Sam Darnold and every red zone touchdown that he threw last year. So that's why. If Jalen Sundell is going to win this center job, it's going to be not only because they think he gives them the best chance to win today, that has to be part of it, but that long-term he has the highest upside. And that's why it makes all the sense in the world. I love everything about Olu Oluwatimi, all the things that Schneider touched on there, the leadership, how much the guys in that locker room like him and respect him. I think he can, as I said, be a very good player and a long-term starter in this league. And if he ends up winning the job, I think we're okay there. But the reason I wanted to do this breakdown and kind of highlight this today is just so that you know ahead of time, right? If we get to the second week of camp, first week of preseason, maybe it goes into week 2 of the preseason, even though Mike McDonald said they want to settle these things sooner rather than later. And it's announced that Jalen Sundell is going to be our starting center. And some of you might think, wait a minute, what? And I can understand the inclination, and the immediate reaction might be wide-ranging, right? Oluwatimi's a bust. We wasted a 5th-round pick on him, to which I would say that's not how drafts work. Everything after even the first round, everything has some risk to it. You're taking shots on these players, right? But also different scheme, all that stuff. I would encourage you strongly, instead of thinking that way, to instead think, wow, this Sundell kid, they really found a gem. Like that athletic profile, not to mention the chemistry and the continuity of being familiar with the guy playing next to him, that they started a number of games at NDSU during the time that Sundell was the starting center there. And Zabel played some left guard next to him. Not a lot, because he bounced around a lot too, and he played a lot of tackle. But they have spent time playing together at left guard and center. So you have two guys, they're best friends, they're roommates. Like we've talked about chemistry and continuity on this line for a long time, and that comes from playing together. But imagine if you took it a step further, right? We talked this offseason about the potential of drafting, numerous guys off that Georgia line. Tate Ratledge, Dylan Fairchild, Jared Wilson. Maybe take a combination of Fairchild and Wilson, or Wilson and Ratledge, and boom, those guys know how to handle stunts and twists together, and there's some value in that too. So based on everything that I've shown you here today, if that's the way this center battle goes, be excited about it, because I do think the long-term upside and the athletic ceiling that Sundell provides is something you can get really excited about. And I should have gone back and looked up Max Unger's RAS, because I think he kind of fits that profile too. Like Unger was a taller, longer center, but he was able to move. As Greg Bell also said, and went on to say there, a lot of it's going to come down to what happens when they put the pads on, because he's also going to have to be stout at the point of attack. He's also going to have to pass protect. We've talked about this wide zone scheme so much and how important it is that they are able to run the football this year. And I've said it myself that I think it's the biggest key to whether this offense can be good or not, is how effective they can be running the football. But you also have to keep Sam Darnold clean as possible. You have to protect the quarterback, and that's been as big an issue for the last few years as running it effectively as well. And that's something Oluwatimi did exceptionally well at Michigan. His last 2 years, not a hit or hurry or sack allowed. It's pretty impressive. Doing it for his last season, anyway, in the Big Ten. So, but Sundell certainly has, I like the footwork. That athletic ability shows up in his pass protection as well. And as we get closer to camp, we might do a bigger breakdown on that, showing some tape over on the Patreon side. What do you think? Who's your favorite and why for the center position? right? In the meantime, though, hit that like button if you would. Subscribe to the channel. Really helps. Just got over 10,000 subscriptions last week. Really, really appreciate all of you. Very flattered. It's huge. It's very important for the channel and what I'm striving to do as a full-time content creator. A reminder, if you didn't hear last week, I will be at training camp the first few days. Anyway, at minimum, I've been told that I'll be given credentialed access the first few days. And then I'm going to sit down and meet with the powers that be there with the Seahawks and hopefully get credentialed for the entire season. So if you're ever out on the street, you're at the Pike Place Market, you see Chuck Arnold, John Schneider, go, hey, give my guy Dan some credentials. I watch Seahawks Forever and I love it. If you do love it, all the ways you can support the channel are down below as well. And you can check out that merch store when you have some time also. Happy belated Father's Day again to all the dads out there. And I'll be with you every day this week. Got some cool guests coming up later this week that I don't want to give away yet, but you're going to be pretty damn excited about it as I continue to push through with almost daily content throughout the rest of the offseason before we get to training camp, which starts on the 23rd of July. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I'm Dan. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks.